So starting with Kang from Home Credit, if you don't mind me asking.
Yes. You can ask.
Oh, good. Can you tell us a little bit about your sustainability strategy? How do you build your strategy through the organization, from the leadership level down to the employees, talking about it with your customers? What does that look like as a responsible finance lender in an emerging market?
Okay, let me just explain what home credit is about, and I think it's going to be very simple for you to relate. So we are a leading financial company, right? And we are specializing in consumer lending. But our mission and purpose is to basically provide credit to underserved and underbanked population in Vietnam. And that's what we've been doing for 17 years. And we've been serving over 25% of the Vietnamese population in their first time lending experience and their first time inclusion. So when we speak sustainability, obviously, and we speak inclusion, it kind of resonates on the social aspect of ESG, right? But also on the governance aspects. So the whole brand, actually, where we say that actually we should empower the customer to live the life they want, is a lot about customer relationship and how you build customer relationship over a long term. So it's about building trust, but also building mutual commitment. And I think we start by aligning from this brand value and belief that actually we will be able to serve customers throughout their whole life. Mm-hmm. And if you want to serve customers throughout their whole life, then you need to have basically this long-term commitment towards the way we would deliver financial solution, right, to make them sticky. And one figure that speaks for that is actually that 70% of our customers are returning back to us for the next loan. So which is quite important. That means we have a responsibility into how we basically create that relationship and how we maintain and nurture that relationship. So we speak about alignment. I think it starts from the top, obviously. So we have this brand that actually is driving the purpose of our company over the last 17 years. And it's about responsible financing. And we speak about responsible financing by also saying, having the courage to say no to our customer. Mm-hmm. So one thing is you can be very opportunistic in providing lending to any customer who wants some money and go through the door, right? But then in that case, you are not fulfilling your responsibility, which is that at some point in time, you need to say no to this customer because they're just not able to repay their loan. And it starts with that. Simply, the simple act of saying no is one act where you basically are creating sustainability. The second aspect, which I would emphasize, is financial inclusion goes through education and creating a mutual commitment between the customer and us. It's a commitment, it's a contract. They're basically committing to get some money from us, and in return, they need to repay it on time. So this mutual responsibility starts with education. It starts with the way we're basically going to explain to the customer, down from the sales assistant that is going to be explaining the application to him up to the signing, what are the mutual responsibility, and how we basically are going to remind customer about their obligation, and also how we remind ourselves about our obligation, that actually we're a customer-centric company. So that's the alignment, right? Then there is this, how do you say this? What do you call that? Adaptation, right? So I think adaptation, it's a lot about ethics, and it's a lot about being professional, down to the bar of the tea and down to how you basically are disseminating throughout your employees the proper message and the proper explanation of how you want them to sell and how they're able to basically create this relationship over time. And I think the amplification and the stories, I mean, I think and there's nothing more rewarding than having your first-time customer, a Grab delivery man, basically, getting married, coming back to us, renovating his home, getting back to us to renovate his parents' home, having children, having a room for their children, and always returning back. This guy is a real case. 7 years with us, and still doing more loans with us, as we basically just get into that relationship. I think that's it. That tells it all.
I love that. I love what I hear is about really managing expectations, right? In terms of that engagement with your customer, building trust and keeping that trust and earning that trust, and then following through on the commitments that you communicated. I think that's amazing. Russell, similar big question for you. What does your corporate strategy look like for sustainability and brand creation? Who sets these goals? And how do you work in Vietnam with all your partners, which is farmers, customers, to meet those ambitious targets?
How long do I have? 'Cause I can spend it. I'm joking.
I mean, we have some time, but...
No, I'll try and be succinct. I think maybe it's also to start with, it's the essence of who we are as a company. I don't know how many of you know that Friesen Campina has been around for more than 150 years. And essentially we are a cooperative in Europe, and we are owned by more than 14,000 farmers. So that's as your starting point. The planet is essential to their livelihood. They are producing dairy, which is one of the most nutritious foods you can get. You put the two together, it really becomes the essence of who we are as an organization. And I think it's not a case of an ESG strategy versus a business strategy. For me, the power in it is when they're inextricably linked and they're interlocked. And one is not a means to the other. And I think that's also something we see a lot in the world today, is a little bit, we would talk about it as greenwashing, is ticking a box on maybe scorecards and a lot of commitments that we have. But is it relevant to your brand? Is it relevant to your product? Is it relevant to your brand proposition to your consumer? And I think that's the essence of what is amazing to work for a company like Friesen Campina. Closer to home, we've been in Vietnam for 30 years. We came in just after Doi Moi. We were the first to introduce independent dairy farming and a program of collecting milk and helping farmers, and continue to work with small-scale farmers today. But I think the essence of who we are is really twofold, and that is providing access to nutrition and in balance with the planet. And the two things obviously go hand in hand in the communities that we serve, because we're not necessarily here to profit on them. We're also here to empower and to shape and to build and make a meaningful contribution to society. What may shock or surprise a lot of you is when I talk about, despite a lot of the progress Vietnam has made in the last 30 years, there are still significant nutrition challenges in Vietnam. We still have hidden hunger and a triple burden of malnutrition. And some of the statistics to call out a little bit, if we look at some of the micronutrient deficiencies, more than 90% of children under the age of 12 do not get enough vitamin D. I'm sure we've all been complaining about the sun, how hot it is, but it's quite alarming. 80% do not get enough calcium. 65% do not get enough vitamin C. And you can go on and on and on. But it becomes a cycle as well of making good nutrition accessible. Also, it helps to elevate the nutritional status and ultimately the development and progress of a country. And that's the essence of who we are. And of course, in balance with the planet, we do have a commitment on being climate neutral by 2050. We're well on track on that journey. We were one of the first pioneers in terms of recycling and collecting our waste back in 2019. So I think we just had a 5-year anniversary. So that, of course, energy usage in our plants, no waste to landfill, reusing our water. These are all part of doing good business as a good corporate citizen, but more importantly, in how we add value and start to differentiate and be distinct in a consumer.
I was telling Russell in one of the prep sessions that in my previous NGO, I managed a community dental program, right? And so, of course, the context in which we're all operating is that, you know, at this moment in Vietnam, we are a middle-income country in which you have some people in the country who are malnourished because they don't have access to clean and safe food. And then you have another population of children who are malnourished because they have access to fast food and in a convenient city like Ho Chi Minh City, right? And so how do you balance, how do you bring in nutrition in a country that's going through this kind of transition? And I think that speaks to like how we build brand value and how we build our ESG initiatives in the context of this developing, wonderful country we live in.
Am I allowed to pick up on something?
Please.
Thank you. You said keep a discussion, so I will. I think that's quite important. How many of you are parents in the room? Quite a number of you. And when it comes also to storytelling, and you saw how important that is, we have a deep understanding on nutritional intake based on science and quantitative study. And standing in a room as parents, and if there's 10 of you and I said 9 out of 10 do not have enough vitamin D, every single one of you would think it's not my child. Because now I'm not a bad parent, I'm a good parent, I nourish my children. And that's one of the challenges you also have when it comes to storytelling, is we know we are doing a lot of good and we are providing access to nutrition and the right nutrition for the right needs. But I cannot use a negative ticking a box checklist of these are deficiencies, this is what I'm doing. I have to turn that into a way that adds value to a consumer. And that starts speaking in a language of helping your child to grow strong and learn every day. Those are really what, as a parent, you want. But the essence behind it is a little bit more fundamental. And that's where you can have conversations with different stakeholders who maybe understand. But I think maybe the message to the smaller businesses is be conscious of who your target consumer is, what value proposition it is for them, and your messaging to them that speaks to them in a language that they understand, not in a language where you're coming from a corporate that I'm one of everyone else.
Just a gentle reminder from our translator that put the mic close to our face and so we can speak slowly.
Will
so
do, sorry.
Translator can keep up.
It's just interesting picking up again on what you were saying there about don't focus on the negative, particularly with storytelling. There have been numerous studies that say, if we even just take another issue like climate change, we've had decades of talking scientifically or decades of focusing on floods and images of droughts and all the rest. And what that does to the individual taking in that information is it physically shuts down your prefrontal cortex, which you need for problem solving. So you're not going to break through to any consumer by going directly with you being a poor parent. You need to find, what is the solution? What is the optimistic story that we can tell here? What does the future look like?
Segueing to another, Karen, do you want to say something?
I mean, if everyone is allowed to pick up.
Yes, I was going to mention, for example, right, we were talking about nutrition, but in that same way as a responsible lender, right, we're living in a moment where we have more consumable, we want stuff, right? Like, for example, we want motorbikes, we want e-bikes, and as a responsible lender, this must be attention for you too. And
True. I think when you do consumer lending, it starts also by explaining what is financing, right? And I think one truth is, even if Vietnamese population is more and more digitized and more digital savvy, they're not financial savvy. So that's quite important to actually state that when you want to start doing lending, you have to explain lending. It's quite interesting as a point of view, but I mean, actually, how many of you basically have children? I mean, let's take the point of your parents, right? And children are asking for money to purchase something. And how do you create with your children and with your young population the way that they can manage money and they can save for the future, right? So that's altogether quite a concern that I want to share as well, because I'm addressing Vietnamese adult population. It does not mean that we don't have to also educate this adult population that is actually coming through the door, and digital solution, and how you basically also even train them to anti-fraud. Right? Don't push the button on the SMS that has been sent to you asking for your credit card number and your PIN number.
so if I can just tap on that for 1 second. If we talk about, because I also know that we started a little bit late, and I do want to give time for at least one question from the audience. So can I ask you, since it's an investor conference, what is missing? Meaning, what else can we do to help enable companies like yourselves to succeed in this balance between sustainability and brand value? Do we need support from the government? What does the support from investment look like? Can I ask that question?
Sure. I think what we would need mostly is that actually there is a real coordination of effort between government, enterprises, and basically changing behaviors. Because when you look at green, it starts always from the top, from the major infrastructure projects. It starts from manufacturing being greener. But then when you want the offer to meet the demand, there's nobody there. And in reality, even if I start at the bottom of the ladder, the consumer lander, the one that actually is my consumer, is not caring too much about what is green. Because for the moment, there's nothing available that he can afford with a convenient price. And I think in this area, I mean, government, they should help us to basically create more coordination, more standards that we are going to be able to apply, right? I mean, just a reference to Europe, right? When we were basically moving to electricity, there were some incentive programs to move to electricity. No such thing exists here, right? So then if you want to promote practices where you move from one place to the other, I think it's quite normal to see government in action, helping basically the change in behavior and the change in consumption pattern. So that's where I think investors can help, making the difference into bringing from the outside what we are missing inside, which are references and practices that could be basically shared, and supporting basically investors to go to the companies that really have a purpose and wants to drive their purpose meaningfully.
Mm. So something we've discussed in previous conferences too is, for example, the work in progress of the green taxonomy, right? Which would help the government enable incentives for companies who are doing well, doing this the right way. And then as an example of like the offset of that is, I'm not trying to name and shame, but I think it was like 5 months ago, right? Vietjet got penalized by Singapore because of a sort of greenwashing campaign they had on an eco ticket, but there was nothing eco about that ticket. But because in Singapore, actually they have standards in terms of marketing and greenwashing, then they were able to sort of make that visible. Sorry, Russell, were you going to say something?
I was going to add, if you would
Please.
like, I think from our industry perspective, Vietnam has seen exponential growth and rapidly for the last 30 years. And with that has also brought in a lot more choice, a lot more consumerism. But regulations haven't kept pace. And for those of you staying in touch with the FMCG market, you would have heard or read about a little bit of a milk scandal in the last few weeks. And I think that also goes back to, for me, the essence of why we exist is providing access to nutrition. And here is making a lot of declarations on pack to the most vulnerable population, taking baby, could be infant milk or something along those lines, putting it in straight into a bottle into your child's mouth, or an elderly, where is not compliant and is not delivering on certain level of quality and trust. So I think regulation for our industry, whether it comes to sugar, compliance, advertising, across the board, would be a big help as well, because there's a lot of people looking to make short-term quick buck, which, okay, they might make a little bit of money, but it's not a long-term solution. And for the companies and brands that do add value in a responsible manner and do the right things for the communities, I think with regulation, with all of that encompass, is where you will succeed.
I was just going to say that regulation is catching up, particularly in Asia now. I mean, I think Korea was the first jurisdiction to have fines, but we can't wait for that. And really, it has to be leaders that make sure that this is filtering through in terms of training across the board when it comes to greenwashing. Because we are moving into that era of greenwashing, which is, you know, the sound of silence also comes at a cost. And so we always say, you know, talk about the good, the bad, and we're getting there, because we have to share our learnings along the way. There are a lot of businesses that are good examples of companies that are actually sharing their lessons learned. Unilever did it, Ørsted did it out of Denmark, and companies that are sharing their IP that can help transform industries. And in doing so, they're building confidence and brand loyalty and trust, because they're becoming what we call solutionaries. They're sharing that information for the greater good of all. And that becomes, you know, highly respected. And again,
I'm hearing a lot of themes about, I mean, even in our prep session, talking about sort of the importance of ethics, right? Again, that purpose-driven, the importance of governance on this side of ESG and brand value creation. I want to make sure to invite one question from the audience if we can. If there's anyone with a pressing, ooh, I see Phiên already. Question, can we have a mic for, can I have a mic for our question? She's in the middle in that pink. And if you can introduce yourself and then shoot that question out.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your valuable sharing. My name is Tiếng. I'm working as independent consultant for the S in ESG because I work for human rights and business consultancy. And my question is about what is your advice? What are practical strategy or low cost approaches that SME in Vietnam can adopt to integrate ESG in their process to build their brand identity, given that limited resources compared to the large corporation in Vietnam markets. So what is your advice? What are your advices? Yeah. Thank you.
Good question.
So maybe allow me, right? I think it starts with baby steps. I think SMEs, they should not embrace too high of a goal, right? I mean, they should just start by stating their case and their brand to be just basic steps you want to basically fulfill and promise, right? Don't go too high. Don't shoot for green, zero carbon emission at some point in time. Just say, okay, we want this process to be limiting waste as much as we can, as an example, right? And then in that case, you try to find your ways across how those waste would be reused. And small cases are going to build up by large and wide. We start small, and when we start small, I mean, like in our case, we started small. We started with COVID period and supporting communities, right? And then it grew little by little because there were some traction in the ideas and in the purpose we were trying to find. I think you should find your purpose, and you should have the proper baby steps implemented so you're able to fulfill your promise. Not too high, not too low, but just something that actually allows you to serve your purpose right.
I think it's good advice, not to be too ambitious. And yes, you might look at the big brands and think straight away, I want to go national and I want to do everything. Where it starts, integrating ESG into your consumer proposition. What problem am I solving for my consumer? How does ESG help? If it doesn't help, don't do it. If it doesn't add value to the consumer, don't do it right now. And once you understand who is at problem, whose problem am I solving, focus only on them. And go slow to go fast. Build it very small, brick by brick, but stay true to who you are without becoming too widespread too quickly. I think it's good advice not to go and make zero carbon commitments, etc., when it's not going to be relevant necessarily to your consumer base. So focus really, what problem am I trying to solve? How is ESG relevant in there? And go slow to go fast.
And never shoot for opportunities.
I would also add, I mean, you said you're focused on human rights, right? And yeah, focus on your people. Actually, one of the biggest disconnects that we see is in operationalizing sustainability is that there's not enough effort put into the education of your people and connecting their role with it. I don't know how big your organization is, but whether you're 50 or 200 people, there's still an opportunity to focus on the small, but making sure everyone knows what I mentioned, that one powerful truth is. And because you're focusing on something that is inherently human, tell those stories.
I think that's a good build as well. So I actually meant to say it earlier. When you say how to integrate it into the organization as well, is make people feel it every day. If you ask me where do I work, normally my answer is, or what my job is, my answer is I nourish Vietnam. I'm not an MD of Friesen Campina or a HR business partner or a finance director, no. My job, every day I wake up and go to work to nourish Vietnam. That makes me feel purposeful in everything I do.
Yeah.
And that starts to build that thread also through the organization.
That's the good point with a strong purpose. I'm a co-chair of an organisation called the Mekong Club. It's an anti-modern day slavery organisation. And same thing, we go in, we say we're working with business to fight the business of slavery. You know, and it's a deeper thought. People sort of pause and think about that. You know, and it's inspiring.
Thank you for those insights. And I would just like to say, Phiên, you stole my last question. I was going to ask for takeaways. And so we did start a little late. But can I just say, can we have one more burning question and then we can sort of close the session? If not, I have an alternative question in my mind, which is, so we've talked a lot about sort of how you engage with your customers, how you would advise smaller businesses to start this journey of ESG and brand value creation. And so I would like to ask, actually, how do you drive it from on the governance level, from the leadership down to through the rest of the organization? Is it the board? Who's doing the things?
Well, I think it's the board, right? But the board just sets the direction, and then it's about engagement of employees. So your employees, they need to take it up, and they need to basically drive this down. And I think that's what is quite important when you basically look at that. Is you were speaking about stories and how compelling they are, right? And the question is, how do you create this engagement for ESG that takes you to the level where an employee by himself would go and volunteer to do some of these sustainability action, right? And I think that's where these stories are quite important for us to basically cement the whole culture around ESG and how you build sustainability into your company. Because it has to be going down, but it has to be also executed down, right? So that's for me quite important to say that it's actually, you need to live it and it has to be part of your core values and DNA. And if it's part of your values and your DNA, then it's natural action.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's more about walking the talk every day in your daily life. I'm also a firm believer in leading from the front. So I'm not going to ask people to do it. This morning I was out with the sales team packing shelves and educating retailers as well about some of the nutritional challenges myself. And I think that's also important. In terms of governance, you say on the board and management team, everyone has a role to play. And that's also including who we engage with externally and making sure that they come on board with who we are as an organization and only choose to work with those that do. And also being the fresh pair of eyes to make sure that these conversations that are adding value to, let's say, accessible nutrition in balance with the planet is embedded in the strategy on a frequent basis whenever we're reviewing the business plan moving forward. And I think that's a collective responsibility.
The whole board side is one thing I have a little bit of an issue on, because I don't think even in markets, I live in Hong Kong, it's obviously a big financial market, I still don't think boards are educated enough and putting enough scrutiny on the ESG metrics as they do the financials. And so there needs to be a lot of education around this and a lot of movement perhaps from just looking at sustainability as from a risk perspective, but rather translating that risk to opportunities. And the other area in terms of governance I think is important is, I think what you're getting at as well is, how do you make it obviously everyone's role? And that comes down to the governance structures that you set up to align with whatever your sustainability strategy framework is. Have a look at how you're setting up teams to communicate around this. We're increasingly seeing now sustainability teams reporting into the CFO. That's one way. I've heard of other companies that had their own 3P departments and they share the same budget. So you have brand communications, and HR all together in one department. So think about how you can break down those silos and get people working together and sharing the financial resources, because that's another big part from coming from the consultancy side.
So if I synthesize what sort of this session has talked about, it reminds me of a conversation I had with one of my clients who I'm looking at, but I'm not going to say who it is. And when I explained this idea of sustainability and brand value creation, right, I was explaining to the staff that, one, there's the purpose, right? There's the core values that tie into that purpose. and that you have to make sure there's enough connective tissue that people all along the chain inside your company know what their role is to that purpose, to communicating about what the brand means, and then on an everyday basis knowing how to advance that brand, right? So that there is value. And I remember they said to me, that sounds like a political campaign, Jivan. And I was like, it kind of is, right? Like it because it's the core of what you're doing. It has to be part of the strategy, and then it slides in all the surprising places. So I want to thank my panel for joining us and sharing your insights and your experience, especially in a growing domestic market in Vietnam. Louisa and Kang and Russell.